In June 2022, a Ukrainian fighter named Askar Mozharov stepped into the UFC octagon for his debut fight against Alonzo Menifield. Within 5 minutes, he was getting his face smashed in by brutal elbows, tapping out to save himself from further damage. 2 months later, news broke that he had failed his drug test for a banned substance. Shortly after that, the UFC quietly cut him from their roster, ending his professional fighting career before it ever really began. His entire tenure with the world's biggest MMA promotion lasted exactly one fight, which he lost in devastating fashion in the first round. None of that was even the most embarrassing part of Askar Mozharov's story, because as it turned out, this Ukrainian fighter had spent years systematically lying, cheating, and committing outright fraud just to convince the UFC that he was worthy of stepping into their octagon. He faked fight results, submitted fraudulent records to databases, impersonated event promoters, created entirely fictional fighting organizations, and even changed his legal identity to hide his pathetic early career. He built an elaborate house of lies that somehow fooled one of the most scrutinized sports organizations in the world. And the absolutely insane part? For a brief moment in time, it actually worked. But let's start at the beginning. Before he was Askar Mozharov, this guy was someone completely different. His real name was Artur Shadkov, and he was not very good at mixed martial arts. Shadkov started his MMA career in Ukraine around 2012, and from day one it was clear he had a problem. Whenever he fought anyone with actual skill, he got destroyed, usually in the first round, usually by submission. But his early record tells the whole story. He'd beat up some taxi driver making his MMA debut, then immediately lose to the first legitimate fighter he faced, beat another random Ukrainian guy with zero experience, then get choked out by someone who actually knew what they were doing. By 2016, Shadkov's record stood at a pathetic 7 wins and 8 losses. And here's the thing, those 7 wins? They were all against complete nobodies. Guys making their debuts. Local tough guys who probably learned to fight by watching YouTube videos. Put yourself in Artur Shadkov's shoes for a minute. You had dreams of making it to the UFC, of testing yourself against the best fighters in the world, and instead you've lost every single fight against legitimate competition, usually getting submitted in the first round. Would you give up on your UFC dream and accept that fighting was never going to be more than a hobby? Or would you go back to training, work harder than ever, and try to make an improbable comeback through sheer determination? Well, Artur Shadkov decided to do neither. Instead, he chose a third option: lying, cheating, and committing fraud to trick the world into thinking he was actually good at fighting. And the crazy part? It worked. Shadkov's first attempt at reinventing himself was actually pretty clever, at least in theory. He figured if he couldn't escape his terrible record, maybe he could just escape his terrible name. So Artur Shadkov legally became Askar Mozharov, hoping to start fresh with a blank slate. The logic was simple: new name, new fighter, new record. Promoters would Google Askar Mozharov and find nothing. No embarrassing submission losses, no pattern of getting destroyed by actual competition, just a mysterious new prospect ready to make his mark. There was just one problem with this master plan: the internet doesn't forget, and neither do the record keepers at Sherdog and Tapology. These sites track every professional MMA fight on the planet, no matter how obscure or pathetic. We're talking fights in Ecuadorian nightclubs, Afghan community centers, and Ukrainian parking lots. If 2 people put on gloves and someone called it professional MMA, these databases had it logged. So when Askar Mozharov started fighting, the eagle-eyed record keepers immediately spotted the connection. Same face, same terrible grappling, same pattern of beating nobodies and losing to everyone else. Within weeks, Artur Shadkov's 7 wins and 8 losses were transferred over to his shiny new identity. The name change had accomplished exactly nothing except wasting money on legal fees. Mozharov was still stuck with the same pathetic record that made him unemployable by any serious MMA promotion. His grand plan to fool the system had been thwarted by basic fact-checking. But rather than accept defeat and maybe try actually getting better at fighting, Mozharov decided to escalate. If changing his name couldn't erase his losses, then maybe he could erase them a different way. And that's when things got really stupid. What happened next was a systematic campaign of deception so brazen and so incompetent that it's honestly impressive in its own twisted way. Mozharov and his team decided that if they couldn't beat the record keepers, they'd try to con them instead. Their first target was a 2016 loss to Marcelo Torrio, an unknown Brazilian who'd submitted Mozharov in the first round at Full Metal Dojo 11, some sketchy fight card held in a Bangkok nightclub. Mozharov figured this event was so low-level and obscure that nobody would be able to verify what actually happened if he just claimed it never took place. So they sent an email to Sherdog posing as the Full Metal Dojo promoter, claiming that Mozharov had never actually fought on the card, and the loss should be removed from his record. Simple plan, right? Just one problem. They used a Russian email address to impersonate a Thai promoter. That's like trying to convince someone you're from Texas while speaking with a thick Boston accent. But wait, it gets worse. The fake promoter name they signed the email with didn't exist, which Sherdog figured out with about 30 30 seconds of Googling. And the cherry on top of this incompetent sundae, video footage of Mozharov getting choked out by Torrio was readily available online. When Sherdog responded with, "Here's literally a video of you getting submitted," that was pretty much game over for that particular lie. Undeterred by this spectacular failure, Mozharov's team decided to try again with another loss, this time targeting a 79-second submission defeat to Fenrong in China at something called Legend King Championship. Having learned absolutely nothing from their previous disaster, they once again used a Russian email address to contact fight databases, claiming that Mozharov hadn't actually fought that night and a martyr. But this time, they came prepared. They had a fake fight poster, complete with wrong promotion logos that looked like they were designed by a kid using Microsoft Paint. They even submitted a random YouTube video of some Asian guy fighting a white guy, claiming this was footage of the real fight and that it clearly wasn't Mozharov because the distinctive tattoos were missing. The Sherdog team took one look at this evidence and absolutely demolished it. They had the real event poster showing Mozharov was clearly scheduled to fight. They had the actual fight footage in glorious 720p showing Mozharov getting his ass kicked, and they probably had a good laugh at the fake poster that looked like a middle schooler's art project. Here's the thing though, these were just the obvious failures that got caught and publicly exposed. For every embarrassingly fake attempt that got shot down, there were probably several that slipped through the cracks. The strategy was actually pretty smart. Exploit the fact that nobody really cares about unknown regional fighters getting their records slightly wrong. Fight databases rely heavily on promoters and fighters' teams to submit accurate information, and they don't have the resources to fact-check every single result from every tiny show in every corner of the world. Most of the time, if someone says a fight happened a certain way, the databases take them at their word, unless something seems obviously suspicious. So while Mozharov was getting publicly humiliated for his most incompetent fraud attempts, his systematic campaign of lies was actually working more often than not. Fake wins were getting added to his record, real losses were getting removed, and slowly but surely his pathetic 7-8 record was transforming into something that might actually fool a major promotion into thinking he was worth signing. Somehow, through a combination of successful fraud and fights that weren't properly investigated, Mozharov managed to completely transform his image. By 2021, instead of being Artur Shadkov with 7 wins and 8 losses, he was Askar Mozharov with a record of 25 wins and 7 losses. And that fake record got him something incredible, a UFC contract. To 99% of people, this signing meant nothing, just another unknown fighter padding out the bottom of UFC cards. But to the record-keeping teams who dealt with Mozharov's fraud attempts, it must have felt like a punch to the stomach. This guy had actually conned his way into the biggest MMA promotion in the world. The UFC tried to book Mozharov twice in 2021, but both fights fell through, first due to visa issues, then an undisclosed injury. But finally, in 2022, his debut was confirmed, Askar Mozharov versus Alonzo Menifield at UFC Vegas 56. And that's when everything started to unravel. See, when you're an unknown fighter on a preliminary card, nobody really cares about your background. But when you're about to fight in the UFC, people start digging. Journalists, hardcore fans, gamblers, they all want to know who this Askar Mozharov guy is. Unfortunately for Mozharov, the Sherdog team was also doing some digging, and in the week leading up to his fight, they struck gold. They discovered that 2 of Mozharov's 25 wins had come in a completely fictional promotion called Mung Mung Championship. This fake promotion had managed to fool record keepers because it had the same initials as the real Moz Martial Championship. The governor. If you Google Mung Mung Championship today, you'll find essentially nothing. No website, no photos, no evidence it ever existed. Because it didn't. Then they found another fake win that was supposedly held at a venue in Ukraine that had been permanently closed months before Mozharov allegedly fought there. Between the time Mozharov signed with the UFC and the time he actually stepped into the octagon, his record went from 25 wins and 7 losses to 19 wins and 12 losses. That's 11 fights that just disappeared. As Alonzo Menifield put it, his record fluctuated like the damn stock market. By the time Mozharov stepped into the cage, he'd been completely exposed as a fraud. The MMA media was calling him a fake. Fans on Reddit were memeing about him. Menifield was calling the whole situation preposterous and questioning whether Mozharov was even a real fighter. But here's the thing about fighting, you can't fake your way through actual punches to the face. When the cage door closed, all of Mozharov's lies and manipulation couldn't help him, because at the end of the day, he was still the same guy who used to get submitted by regional fighters in the first round. Menifield took him down twice in the first round and proceeded to beat the living hell out of him with elbows. Mozharov managed to land exactly 2 significant strikes before getting TKO'd at 4 minutes and 40 seconds of round 1. After the fight, Menifield admitted that knowing about Mozharov's fake record made him want to hurt him even more. He called Mozharov a weirdo and a chump and said he wanted to fight him in the parking lot. Less than 2 weeks later, the UFC cut Mozharov from the roster. His entire UFC career lasted one fight, which he lost badly in the first round. But wait, it gets worse. 2 months after the fight, it was revealed that Mozharov had failed his drug test for the banned substance GW1000, 516 sulfone. The Nevada Athletic Commission suspended him for 6 months and fined him $2,529.00. So let me get this straight. He lied his way into the UFC, got dominated in his debut, got cut from the roster, and then failed a drug test. This might be the most humiliating UFC debut of all time. Mozharov's UFC fight took place in June 2022. It's now been over a year, and he hasn't fought since. His record has been revised even further downward. Sherdog now lists him at 15 wins and 14 losses, while Tapology has him at 17 wins and 14 losses. Even more fake wins have been exposed and removed from his record. The man who once claimed to be 25-7 is now, at best, a .500 fighter who's probably done with professional MMA forever. The moral of the story? Crime doesn't pay. But in MMA, it might pay in the form of a $12,000 0-cent show and $12,000 0-cent win contract that gets terminated after you embarrass yourself on the biggest stage in combat sports. If you enjoyed this deep dive into one of MMA's most bizarre scandals, make sure to subscribe for more stories from the weird side of fighting. And let me know in the comments, what other MMA mysteries should we investigate next?